An Unlikely Lent, Extraordinary People of the Easter Story by Rachel Billups. This is Chapter 1, pages 1 through 10. Mary of Bethany. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. John chapter 12, verse 3. Together, we are stepping into the season of the traditional church calendar known as Lent. Lent is a season I have grown to love and appreciate for its fresh invitation to life and its reflection on suffering and death. It's a 40-day journey when many people will choose to engage in particular spiritual practices. Some may choose to give up habits that seem to distract or block our connection to God. Still others will embrace practices that are centering and life-giving to ourselves and those around us. Whether we are laying down distractions or picking up new possibilities, these 40 days invite us to re-engage with Jesus' life, death on the cross, and ultimately the resurrection of Easter. Lent is essentially a season of preparation, and together we are exploring women and men, characters in the gospel accounts, who participate in the events leading up to Jesus' crucifixion. But these very real humans seldom take center stage. They do not make their way into our Palm Sunday cantata, or an Easter play complete with costume-covered Roman soldiers. The story of Easter is generally focused on the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, with a few key players. Peter, John, Mary Magdalene, just to name a few, are the focus of many messages in Bible studies. But I am curious, what else was happening around the earth-shattering event, and whom did it involve? Perhaps women and men who seem to slip through the margins of our Bibles. Might a curious exploration of these stories have something to teach us today? Could we together experience God once again in the unlikely? Today, we begin around the table. Food offerings. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you just wanted to do something to help? Perhaps you experienced a neighbor, a coworker, or a friend who lost someone they love, and you wanted to do something, anything, to demonstrate your care and mindfulness. Maybe you decided to send a text. Some who enjoy talking may make a phone call. And if you are so inclined, you might even decide to bring food, have a meal delivered, or bake a fresh loaf of bread as a sign of your compassion. These acts of love and compassion are never about the casserole. A food offering is our excuse to connect with human to human. Food is a tangible sign of love, declaring, I see you, I love you, and I am here to help. Louise Butts always made the most delicious food. She was my mom's friend. And now that I think about it, I realize she was my mom's best friend. Kids do not expect their parents to have best friends, and certainly they were not the paint your nails on a Friday night besties. My mom, Linda, and Louise were not even let's go on a girl trip buds. They were the kind of best friends who knew the struggles within your family, your parenting woes, and your money shortages. They were committed to walking out life's journey together. While I was growing up, Louise and my mom took turns picking up Louise's daughter, Carissa, and me from track practice. I secretly loved when Louise picked us up because it usually meant I would spend a few extra minutes at her house for what I affectionately called first dinner. Louise's idea of an after-school snack was a delicious soup, homemade bread, and a decadent dessert. Would we be having her gooey cinnamon-soaked monkey bread? She had perfected the art of making chocolate no-bake cookies. Louise's no-bakes were my absolute favorite. There was something about the way she laid out the bowls, the spoons, even the butter for our bread. Each gesture seemed chock-filled of love. I remember dreaming that someday I would be that kind of mama when I grew into adulthood. Newsflash, I am not that kind of mama. Ain't nobody got time for that kind of mama. But I must tell you that when my mom's cancer journey brought her home with hospice, this same woman showed up with pots of food and pies in hand. Determined to die at home, my mom wanted to be surrounded by friends, family, and the land that she loved. There's something centering about belonging to the land. Even though she said she wasn't going to plant a garden that year, she did. Of course, it was smaller, but she grew the fruits and vegetables she loved. String beans, ripe red strawberries, mouth-watering sweet potatoes, and zucchini as big as your arm. My mom and dad had worked our family farm for over 40 years, and just driving onto the property after numerous hospital stays seemed to relax my mom. She seemed as if she could breathe again. As she rested in her hospice bed, her smile indicated that being home felt just right. She went home to be on the farm, to be surrounded by family and friends. And I was not sure she would get what she wanted, to be surrounded by the people she loved. But people just kept coming. Church people, family people, and friend people. Louise came every day with chicken and noodles, mashed potatoes, her homemade spaghetti, fresh baked bread, and pies. Oh my goodness, the pies. There was nearly a pie for every member of my family. Cherry pies, coconut cream pies, apple pies, pumpkin pies, and pecan pies. So many pies. We had to insist that everyone who visited my mom eat a piece of pie. My dad, brother, sister, and I could not consume the carbs fast enough. The pies were broken and shared with everyone who stopped by to chat, to sing, to pray, to cry, to grieve, and to celebrate. Food was the offering. It was a little over the top, it was extravagant, and it made the human connection so rich. Perhaps you, too, have experienced food offerings. Maybe when one of your loved ones walked through the valley of the shadow of death, someone brought food. Or possibly when there's been much to celebrate, a person or group of people came with an offering. It's the casserole that shows up when a child is born, the cinnamon rolls shared among teachers on the last day of school, your best friend who invites you to dinner when you receive a promotion, and even the zucchini bread shared by a neighbor just because they baked an extra loaf. But food offerings are never really about the menu items. Food offerings are always about our deeply human connection, and it's been that way for a long, long time. Beyond the 12 disciples, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were Jesus' closest best friends. It was unclear as to why this trio held such a tender place in Jesus' heart, but it's not hard to imagine that Jesus enjoyed numerous nights in their home and more meals around their table than they could count. Jesus gathered with his best friends for a meal in the Gospel of John to celebrate, because, as we all know, tomorrow is not promised. Tomorrow is not promised. In John's Gospel, Jesus has just raised Lazarus from the dead, and Lazarus has been dead for a while, so dead that the sisters were worried that when those milling about helped open his grave, Lazarus was going to smell terribly bad. Initially, his body had been prepped, anointed, and wrapped for the long slumber, and yet Jesus' "Lazarus, come out" called him back to life on this side of heaven. Of course, that's a colossal reason to celebrate, but not too much, too fast, because Jesus already knew he was in trouble. Jesus once again created a disturbance among the naysayers, so much so that they were ready to eradicate him and his traveling ministry. Jesus took a risk coming to Bethany to heal his friend, and now he's together with them once again in that same small town. There was an urgency as John wrote about this gathering. I encourage you to read the Gospel of John, chapter 11 and 12 together. When you do read those chapters, you will pick up on a tension in the text that seems so thick you can nearly taste it. We are no strangers to tension. I imagine most have experienced tension around tables. At that family gathering where your uncle goes into a political tirade, you experience tension. The wayward cousin decides to show up at the last minute to everyone's surprise, and suddenly there is tension. The work party where someone did not realize a coworker has been let go for not great reasons, and they inquire, "Where's Sam?" You've got tension. The air is thick, the conversation minimal, and those in the room don't know exactly what to do or say. It's this kind of tension that I imagine the disciples were experiencing around Lazarus, Martha, and Mary's dinner table. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. John chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. John situated the reader at the table, preparing for the defining meal of the Jewish faith known as the Passover. The Passover was less than a week away, and like a master storyteller, John's just building the tension. Imagine the scene with me. Jesus and the disciples are reclining at the home of Lazarus, and Martha was serving. Again, not a surprise. According to the writer of Luke, Martha was in the habit of doing such things. Now, as they went on their way, he, Jesus, entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary, who sat at Jesus' feet and listened to what he was saying. Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 39. Martha was not particularly happy with her younger sister Mary for not aiding in the preparations. Is this the same Mary and Martha story with a different twist? Is the writer of the Gospel of John attempting to give us a different angle? It's not exactly clear, but what is clear is that Mary decided to offer Jesus an extravagant gift. Mary, sitting at Jesus' feet, as was her habit, is our sign that Mary, too, was a disciple and a student of Jesus. But on this occasion, Mary was not merely listening. She had brought with her a gift and an intention to share it. As Jesus was speaking, she gently lifted a pound of costly nard perfume out of her bag and anointed Jesus' feet with that oil. The word for anointed in Greek, elapsin, is the same word used when talking about preparing a body for burial. Mary anointed Jesus' feet and then wiped those same feet with her hair. Her actions certainly did not dissipate the tension. These actions added to it. Here's a woman, a follower and friend of Jesus, who touched Jesus' feet, letting down her hair. There was an intimacy to her actions. Mary did not seem to act in desperation, but rather shamelessly poured out an extravagant offering onto Jesus. I wonder, did the disciples look away? Did her actions leave them speechless? There were no immediate protests as Mary focused on washing her friend's feet. But why would Mary do such a thing? Was this a sign that she was just so grateful for Jesus' healing her brother? Did she not know what else to do? Jesus will later say she bought the perfume. But how did she buy this perfume, and with what? Were Mary and her sister Martha independently wealthy? Did Mary own some sort of small business? Could this nard have been part of her inheritance? Was this woman literally pouring her dowry over Jesus' feet as a sign of her unrivaled commitment to Jesus and his ministry? Burn the ships, pour out your most prized possession, Mary. Mary seemed to be with Jesus no matter what. She seemed to be giving Jesus her all. Sometimes this is when I wish I could be a participant around that table. While Mary anointed Jesus' feet, did the men nervously laugh? Did they groan in protest? Did some even applaud Mary? We don't know. Perhaps everyone around the room was merely stunned. There's also this assumption that Jesus was always traveling with a posse. Was it merely the 12, or were there more? Were men and women seated together? Were there children to witness this exchange? I feel compelled to give Judas a bit of credit. While the room full of dinner guests were watching this alternative ritual in shock and horror, Judas asked perhaps what others were wondering. Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor? John chapter 12, verse 5. The author of John added a little commentary, stating that Judas did not actually care about the poor and used to steal money from the common purse. Really? That conclusion seems a bit suspect because wouldn't the disciples just deem Judas irresponsible and keep the purse themselves? Or at the very least, I imagine the disciples asking Jesus to rebuke Judas for his robbing them all. Maybe the author added this bit of commentary because he needed to suggest a reason that Judas would later betray Jesus. Since it was nearly unthinkable, he needed to justify Judas's later behavior. Sometimes we have relationships, friendships, partnerships that go south, and it's only in hindsight we realize that something underneath the surface was going on. At times we attempt to justify why we did not see the infringement in the moment, the affair, the embezzlement, the betrayal, and so we say things like, he or she was always shady. But that was not really the case. Humans can be really human, meaning that sometimes people get caught up in the making bad choices. And sometimes people, particularly us religious types, attempt to portray ourselves beyond our human condition. We say things to ourselves like, I would never do that. I would never say that. There is just no way I could get caught up in something so suspect. But I've been around long enough to realize we all are capable of making less than great choices for ourselves and others. Yes, Judas was only human after all, but Jesus was not having it with Judas that day. Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. John chapter 12, verses 7 through 8. Jesus responded to his anointer's critics, tagging in Old Testament scripture, Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 11. Since there will never cease to be some in need on the earth, I therefore command you, open your hand to the poor and needy neighbor in your land. I've experienced too many people in ministry use John 12, 7 through 8 as justification for not caring for the poor. They place these words, in Jesus' mouth as a mere mandate to ignore the vulnerable among us, with sometimes political implications. But the hearers in the room would have heard the depth of this scripture. The Old Testament was always encouraging, dare I say challenging, the faithful to care for the foreigner, the widow, and the orphan among us. Jesus had a deep passion for caring for the vulnerable. Judas could have been portraying some kind of false piety, and maybe Jesus called him out for his future mishaps. Or maybe Judas was merely the target because Jesus understood the discomfort of the witnesses in the room. Even I struggle to imagine Jesus this vulnerable, a Jesus who needed to be prepared for burial. Mary's gift to Jesus eased the tension in his body as he made his way toward Jerusalem. A needy Jesus does not seem to align with the Jesus of the Gospel of John. And no matter the interpretation of this exchange between Judas and Jesus, Jesus was opening the door for there to be more ways than one to offer love, to bless others, to honor the divine.